Hello everyone, and welcome to another Conan Exiles video. I'm Exiled Phoenix, and today I will be showing you a couple of my personal favorite builds for PvP, as well as some of the meta weapons and armor for this Age of War update. Okay, so I'm going to start with the attribute build so you guys can see exactly what my stats are going to look like after my points are applied and my armor is put on. Basically, we're going to go 20-20-20, Strength, Agility, Vitality. On Strength, we're going with Second Skin for the second perk, because that helps a lot with the weight reduction with the heavy armor, which is what I'm going to start with. Now, if you have light armor, you can probably choose Combo Master if you really want to, but it's probably not going to be too useful in a PvP situation. And then for the fourth perk, we've got Blood Mad Berserker. Crushing Swings is actually pretty useless this update. Stagger really doesn't affect anything because people can roll non-stop without any penalty whatsoever, whereas previous update I actually used Crushing Swings a lot because when you stun someone, if they were low on stamina already, it would force them to either take another hit or roll, and rolling could potentially stam them out, which was not something you want to do in combat. But now that you can just roll repeatedly and there's no penalty for stamming out, there's no point in even having a stagger. I think Crushing Swings needs a good rework. It either needs to be changed to like a damage increase, or possibly cause a stun that cannot be rolled out of for a split second. I think that would make it a little bit like what PvP used to be. But anyway, on to Agility. So for Agility, we're going to choose Precision Strike for our second perk. Now if you use a lot of throwing axes, or if you tend to carry a bow with you, you can use Deadshot. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then for the fourth perk, we're going to choose Rolling Thrust. Now this is an absolute must for PvP, unless you're a bomber. I think you absolutely have to have Rolling Thrust. It's just too good with the current stamina situation. And then for Vitality, we have Fast Healer for the second perk. And then if I'm wearing heavy armor, I use Glutton for Punishment. If I'm wearing light, I use both depending on what I'm doing. Last Stand for like if I know I'm going to be in a close quarter situation like a raid, or possibly even a raid defense where I'm going to be inside my base a lot. But I really like Glutton also, and especially if I'm wearing heavy armor, I think you can get away with using Glutton even in close quarters. I use it all the time. So yeah, that's the attribute build, and right now I'm wearing the heavy armor that I'm going to show you in a second, and these are my stats: 785 HP, 151 stamina, and now I'm going to show you the armor. So this is the heavy armor that I personally use. I know some people use some different pieces, and I'll go over that as well. But I use the Redeemed Legion helmet, which gives you strength weapon damage plus 8%. Void Forge Dragon ribs, which also gives you 8%. Void Forge Dragon gauntlets, health plus 48. Now I see a lot of people using Silent Legion medium gauntlets to get another 8% damage, so if you want to go straight offensive, you can absolutely do that. I just like to have that extra little bit of health and the little bit of armor value extra you get from having a heavy gauntlets instead of medium. Then we have Redeemed Legion Tacit. Now I do this because of the stamina. It's the highest stamina amount for any piece of heavy armor. The next closest being plus 12 stamina on, I think, the Void Forge Dragon Tacit and also the Silent Legion Heavy Tacit. But really, Redeemed Legion will give you plus 17. I see people using also Champion's Leggings. Now, I already use the Champion Boots, so these cost 10 scraps each to farm. So if you want to farm 20 scraps for every kit you make, have at it. It's actually a pretty good armor increase as well. But I personally like to have that little bit of extra stamina. I also see people using Kurak Leggings with this build, but that, to me, that seems like just too much of a decrease in armor value, considering you're wearing all other heavy pieces. And Redeemed Legion Tacit is pretty good too. And then we've got the Champion Boots. Now these are the make-all for this build. In my opinion, if you don't have these, you might as well not be wearing heavy, because it's going to make it that much harder to survive. And the reason for that is that these actually remove cripple, like instantly. So if you got several people poking you with spears, you don't even have to worry about the cripple, which is part of the reason why you usually get hit again after you get hit once, is because you're so slowed down by the first spear hit. So these are really, really helpful in PvP situations. Alright, so again, currently wearing this set of armor. It's transmogged, but this is what it would look like if it was not transmogged. Alright, now onto the light armor. Alright, so this is pretty much the same as it was before the update. Silent Legion Light Helmet, Void Forge Dragonhide Tunic, Void Forge Dragonhide Bracers, Leggings of Kurak for that extra huge chunk of stamina, and then Spider Climb boots for an additional boost in stamina. And I think that that's still pretty important. I see people using Perfected Light boots as well for the strength and agility weapon damage plus 5%. To each their own. Even if you want to swap out one of the health pieces for a damage piece, you can do that too. But it gives you that extra little bit of beef that you need to survive. And right now you get hit by a heavy attack from a great axe and you're like basically half health. So these are definitely good to have. Alright, I'll go ahead and put on that light kit. Alright, so now my max health is 833 and my stamina is 181, which is pretty nice if you have to escape or get away from some people. And then for the attribute build for the light armor, I would recommend probably going Last Stand in Vitality, but you can still use Glutton. It's still pretty good in a lot of situations. So completely up to you, I guess, on that one. And then for strength, pretty much everything be the same. I guess you could go Combo Master if you wanted to, because the weight of the armor is not such a big deal. And then just in general, if you like to carry a lot of throwing axes, or you want to carry a bow and arrows with you so you can finish someone who's running, then you definitely probably would want to have Second Skin, and then you might also want to be wearing Silent Legion Light Gauntlets instead of the Void Force Dragonhide Bracers, because the Silent Legion Light Gauntlets will give you a plus 36 to carry capacity. And this is what that light armor would look like if it was not transmogged. Anyway, if you made it this far in the video and you enjoy seeing this kind of content, consider hitting that subscribe button, and if you like the video, then like it! Alright, now on to the weapons. We're going to start with the two-handed weapons because in my opinion these are really the only weapons you need for PvP, specifically pikes and great axes. I think that a lot of the other weapons in the game right now are just kind of too slow, and this is me speaking from maining a greatsword for pretty much since I started playing PvP, and I'm pretty decent with it, and I don't really use them anymore because they're just too slow. People can just roll spam and get out of the way or completely dodge your attack, like iframe it. So spear, great axe, I think that's where it's at right now. If you want a water weapon, we're going to talk about the one-handed weapons, and sometimes they are good in close quarters situations as well. But still, even in close quarters, I still like to have a great axe. Alright, so for spears, we're going to start with our legendaries. The best one is obviously going to be the Mordlin, 7221. This thing does crazy damage to players, especially if they're wearing light armor. Then we've got the Black Dragon Pike, which is actually an agility weapon, and it causes bleed. So this is really good if you want to try an agility, vitality, and grit build, which I'll actually go over next. Then we got the Vaulting Pole, which is also an agility weapon. It's still pretty good. The Impaler, which has gouging. Now this is really good except for the fact that it's got low durability. Gouging will actually stack to a stack of 20 and does the same amount of damage as bleed, I believe. And then we've got Gavin's Rusty Pike with Disease. Now this is actually super good because when they get stacks of Diseased on them, they take a damage tick every 10 seconds that interrupts any form of healing. Whether it's glutton, food healing, or even a potion that they're drinking at the time, it'll interrupt it all. Alright, and if you do want to make craftables, these are absolutely viable since the legendary pikes are not super easy to get. I would recommend going with the Lemurian Pike, because it pretty much just takes hardened steel to craft, I believe. I think Gravedigger takes star metal, but this one you have to get a recipe from the Unnamed City to get it. Ancient Lemurian Trident is still really good, actually. They didn't nerf it too bad. It's got the severe cripple just like the Daggers of Dagon, but it's probably not as good as the Lemurian Pike just because you can't poison it. All these ones with poison on them, these are the ones that you can poison. Now on to Great Axes. Pretty much you only have one option unless you have DLCs, and that's the Star Metal Great Axe. And they did nerf it a little bit, but not too bad. It used to be 8712 with a kit on it and Bladesmith crafted. Now it's 8012. Still hits really hard. It hits like a truck. We'll go on to Great Swords, especially for the PvE players, because these are really good for killing world bosses with the roll down chop if you have rolling thrust. If you have a Sword of Crom and you just do roll down chop, you can chunk HP off of a world boss. Like, I think it's like 800 to 1000 HP a hit, depending on their armor value. Then we got the Annihilator, 80 and 45. This is still really good for PvP if you can hit someone with it. Valpedria's Razor, I put this one next on the list because it's still super powerful and it can be purchased at Mechmosis. The Papyrus Blade is next best. Now these last three are just drops that you can get from legendary chests. Well, so is the Razor as well, but these are the ones that you're going to have to farm legendary chests for. And on to hammers. Hammers are still decently viable in PvP, especially the World Breaker. It just hits like a truck even if they're wearing heavy armor. 73, 79. It does sunder on light attacks and it does double sunder on heavy attacks. And then the Ranasan. If you get this from the Warmaker Sanctuary, it's still a really solid weapon. And of course the stats you're seeing are with Master Weapon fittings applied. Alright, now on to the one-handed weapons. I put actually the Gate Guardian first here because it's slightly easier to get than Yogg's Touch, I would say. It's not a guaranteed drop from the Gate Guardian in the Warmaker dungeon, but it is a pretty high chance of dropping. And it's the only weapon that'll drop from him. Yogg's Touch has really good penetration, would be really good against thralls with heavy armor on, or players with heavy armor. And then we have the Glimmer Moon. Now this one I put next because it is purchasable from Mechamos' Spire, and it's the only other axe I'll be talking about because it is purchasable. And I don't really think axes are a super great weapon to go with right now, unless you're using it for a water weapon possibly, or maybe a close quarters situation. And if you want a craftable, you can use the Ancient Lemurian Axe. Now it hasn't been nerfed too bad actually, they just nerfed it by 4 points. And left the armor penetration alone. But still, I mean, you can get a whole box full of these, which are 12 damage more, just by buying them at Mechamos'. And then one-handed swords. These are still really solid weapons. They have a really fast light attack. Well, I should say a really fast first light attack, which is really important because you can roll and then use that. So it still works with rolling thrust. Balias and El's Drinker are at the same level of strength. These are the strongest ones. I think they could probably use a buff, honestly, because these are no better than the Black Ice Broadsword used to be. But El's Drinker, I put this first because it's, again, it's a purchasable at Mechamos', and it does bleed. Balias, though, you can get pretty easily from the Warmaker dungeon. And then Dueling Blade of the Hawk. This one you gotta farm for from legendary chests, but it does have the severe cripple effect, which I think would be really good in the water. And it's good in general anyway. And if you want a craftable sword, you got the Ancient Lemurian Sword and the Lemurian Sword, which are both 62-21. Lemurian Sword can be poisoned, however. I believe the Ancient Lemurian Sword has the severe cripple, if I'm not mistaken. And that's why it can't be poisoned. And these are considerably weaker, 10 damage less. They're not really going to hit that hard. I honestly wouldn't bother with them, especially because you can just buy El's Drinkers. And then the only mace we're going to talk about is the Momentum, because it's severely stronger than the next best, which I believe is the Nordis, and the Nordis is only 72 and 39. So this is really good. It costs a little bit of extra stamina to swing than regular maces, but if you put it on a thrall, they're just going to absolutely melt bosses and possibly even players. And now onto the bows. So I've grouped these in 3 different tiers. We got the higher tier, the medium tier, and the lower tier. The high tier, we've got the Reach of the Red Mother, which has taken a nerf. It's slightly higher damage than it used to be. I think it used to only be 35 damage with a kit on it, but it had higher penetration. It had like 40 penetration. But 39-21, still a really solid bow. It's better than anything else you're going to get, but the farmability is not easy. So we've got the Kari bow next. Now it still is a little bit of grinding to get this recipe, especially if the RNG is pretty bad, because you gotta run the entire wine cellar dungeon and hope the boss drops the proper recipe. But 36 and 21, it's a really solid bow. Then in our second tier, we've got the Hollowbone bow and the Druketo's Voice. Hollowbone bow is 33 and 21, still a cut above the regular ones you're gonna find in legendary chests. And then the Druketo's Voice, which you get from the Warmaker Sanctuary. It has no penetration to start off with, but it has pretty high damage. So when you put a kit on it, 38-12, it's almost as strong as the Reach of the Red Mother, but without the penetration. And then the ones that you find out of the legendary chest, we have a Strength bow, Bessie's bow, which actually Druketo's Voice is a Strength bow too, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, Bessie's bow is a Strength bow, Frost Shot's an agility weapon. Don't know why it's so much heavier, 7 versus 3.5. Don't get that at all. And then the arrows you're going to want, if you really want to go try hard, you can farm the Mandibles of Atlak Nacha. These have been buffed. They used to only be 5 and 50. Now they're 23 and 50, which is absolutely crazy because the strongest arrows used to be Obsidian arrows, which are 20 and 20. Now Obsidian arrows are pretty trash. They're like 16 and 17 or something like that. Now these are kind of hard to farm because the boss that spawns them, I may do another video on this at some point, the boss that spawns them is not guaranteed to spawn. But if it does, it will have anywhere from 50 to 100 of these arrows on it. Now, to me it seems like the boss has less than a 50% chance to spawn because most of the time that I go to this spot in the volcano, the spider's not there. But then you have another option, which is Hollowbone arrows. You can get these from the Harpy Caves near the dam. and they are not guaranteed to drop either, but if you have Careful Harvest, you can pick them up pretty easily from any of the harpy bodies in those caves. And then if you need to craft arrows, you got Superman arrows and Hardened Steel arrows. They're both very similar. Superman arrows are slightly better, but they're pretty much the same arrow. Hardened Steel arrows would be easier to craft right off the bat because you can just unlock the feat in your feats menu. Superman arrows, you have to do a nice climb in the volcano to get the recipe for them, but they are really cheap to craft as well. I think they just take iron bars and demon blood. And now onto our consumables. So what I usually do is I have 1 stack of pure aloe, 1 stack of concentrated aloe on me at any given time. You can use Scorpion Queen poison, and I don't usually carry them, but it probably is a good idea to have 1 or 2 set antidotes on you just for the diseased effect. It's pretty nice to be able to get rid of it. I don't usually die to poison anymore at this point, but you could use it for that too if you carry 2 of them on you. Yogg Feasts I still think are very viable. Everybody says they're really hard to farm. I don't think they're really hard to farm. If you do a hide run, you probably have plenty of feral flesh on you already. Just stick all that in the fridge when you're done. You've probably already got glass flasks out the kazoo, because now that silver ingots now turn into 30 silver coins instead of just 5, it's incredibly easy to farm glass flasks. You just need 1 silver coin to buy 10 glass flasks at Seppenru. Then the only other thing you really need is bone, ichor, and skulls, which you can get from Zath bags. In my opinion, they're still super easy to farm, super viable, but Feral Feasts do heal for the same amount and give you a slight warming effect, and these are pretty easy to craft as well. But in my opinion, I think it's just as much of a pain to farm berries as it is to farm Zath bags, if not more of a pain. And then for your buffs, you're probably going to want double strength buffs, but I've also put the agility buffs here too in case you want to go that route, because especially if you're using a bow, you could do 1 agility buff, 1 strength buff. Now for throwables, you have 2 legendary options. You have the Akbatanan throwing knife and the Fangs of the Red Mother, and these did get a nice buff. I think they used to only be 31 damage or something, which was absolute trash. In my opinion, they're still not really that good, considering Black Ice throwing axes used to be 51 damage. Now they did add penetration, however in my testing of these, they do not bleed like they say they do. So I think that needs to be addressed. If they did bleed, they might be pretty worth using. I mean, if you got them anyway, might as well use them. But look at these, 71 and 0. That's some crazy damage. Like I said, the best throwing axes used to be 51. That was the Black Ice throwing axes. And these were just a little bit stronger than that. I think they were 58 or something, but they got a serious buff. And they're very easy to get. The boss that drops them will either drop them or a Nemedian helmet. I think it's a 50-50 chance. So they're pretty much a guaranteed drop. And then he also drops a key, which can be used to open the chest behind him. So he's like a legendary boss with an added bonus. Whereas the Fangs of the Red Mother are not nearly a guaranteed drop. There's a number of weapons or items that the Red Mother can drop. It's not guaranteed to drop any of them though. And again, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but if you're going to be using a bow or throwing axes, you're going to probably want to switch to Deadshot in your agility perk 2, because the arrows and thrown weapons traveling twice as fast and dealing 15% more damage, that is crazy OP. And now I will talk about the Agility Grit Vitality build, which is especially good this update because of the new Agility legendary weapons. Alright, so we'll check out our attributes here. For Agility, for perk 2, I have Deadshot. If you're not going to use a bow, however, just use Precision Strike. And then for perk 4, of course, Rolling Thrust. And then for Vitality, we got Fast Healer and Glutton for Punishment. Even though I'm using light armor, I'm just using Glutton because on Grit, for perk 4, we're using Steel Theud, which means we cannot take more than 25% of your max health and damage, which is really good for when you're getting hit by a great axe or something. And then for perk 2, we got Stout, which is normally kind of a poop perk, but in this case, I have 266 stamina, so if my stamina is full, that's like an additional 50 armor value. So right now my armor value is actually 686 with light armor, which is pretty crazy. Now I'm going to throw everything extra I have in a chest real quick so I can show you the only caveat to this build, and that's that I only have 1 weapon, 2 stacks of heals, and my food, and I am at 52%. So for this build, you're definitely going to want your Silent Legion Light Gauntlets. We'll put those on, and now I'm at 37%. So at this point, I can actually grab a bow and a stack of arrows and still be at 47%. So you can turn this into a proper bow pike build, or you can have a Balpedier's Razor, which also weighs pretty much nothing if you wanted to. Now what I did forget to mention is that you want to switch out at least the Void Force Dragonhide Tunic for a Ranger chest piece. And this is because that strength weapon damage on the Void Forge Dragonhide is not going to help you one bit in this build. So the Ranger chest piece is going to give you an additional 7 stamina, as well as that agility weapon damage plus 8%. So now you're going to have 273 stamina. Your health isn't going to change, your armor value is going to go down slightly. I think it was 680 or something before, now it's 625, but that's not too big a deal. And then if you want to, you can switch out your boots and your helmet for Ranger pieces also. Now if you do decide to switch the helmet and the boots out, they're going to both decrease your defensive capabilities a little bit. If you switch out the helmet, you're going to lose 48 HP and some more armor value, so you're going to be down to 590. And if you switch out the boots, let's say instead of the helmet, you're going to lose a little bit of stamina, but you actually gain a little bit of armor value. My personal recommendation would be just switch out the chest piece and the boots, and leave the helmet there. That way you've got 632 armor value, and you've still got your 785 HP and 258 stamina. And you will still be putting out some pretty solid damage. Anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you made it this far, hit that like button, and if you enjoy watching this kind of content, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.